Hello, and welcome to the M.O.W. channel. Today's case takes us to Russia's past, focusing on a man believed to have committed more than 90 murders. He was known by many names: the Werewolf, the Angarsk Maniac, and the Wednesday Killer. Before we begin, please don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Now today's case file begins. A dark childhood and the man who became a police officer. A frozen upbringing in Norilsk, Siberia. On March 7, 1964, Mikhail Viktorovich Popkov was born in Norilsk, one of the northernmost industrial cities of the Soviet Union, built atop permanent permafrost. Much like the city itself, buried under snow and ice for most of the year, his childhood was anything but warm or comforting. The first person to leave a deep psychological scar on Popkov was his mother. Struggling with severe alcoholism, she was not a source of safety, but of fear. Verbal abuse and physical violence were routine. In a household defined by neglect and cruelty, young Popkov did not learn how to love. He learned how to stay quiet, hide his emotions, and survive. Psychologists would later argue that the roots of his extreme misogyny were formed during this period. The betrayal and terror he experienced at the hands of his mother gradually transformed into a distorted hatred toward women as a whole. To the child Popkov, women were not protectors but unstable, threatening figures worthy of resentment. Moving to Angarsk in the mask of a normal citizen. Eventually, the Popkov family left the harsh isolation of Norilsk and relocated to Angarsk, a rapidly growing industrial city in the Irkutsk region. With its expanding petrochemical industry, Angarsk appeared to offer a fresh start, a chance to erase the past. Here, Popkov made a decision: he would live as a completely ordinary man. He chose to become a police officer. Militia. In Soviet society, the police symbolized strength, authority, and masculinity, and more importantly, legitimate power. Popkov studied diligently, passed the exams, and earned his uniform. That uniform carried two meanings for him. First, it was a tool of survival, providing social respect and financial stability. Second, it was a fortress, perfectly concealing the twisted desires growing inside him. People trusted the uniform, and Popkov enjoyed that trust, using it to bury his dark instincts even deeper. The model family man in the first cracks. At the Angarsk police station, Popkov was known as quiet, dependable, and hard-working. He married a woman named Elena, and together they had a daughter, Yekaterina. To outsiders, he was a devoted husband and a loving father, playing with his daughter after work, spending weekends with his family. But beneath this picture-perfect life, cracks began to form. Popkov became obsessed with the idea that his wife was cheating on him. There was no proof, but facts no longer mattered. This paranoia reignited the long-buried hatred toward his mother, reshaping itself into rage against women. Instead of attacking his wife directly, he redirected that fury outward. He began telling himself that immoral women must be purified. In his mind, murder became a moral act. He started seeing himself as a cleaner, someone removing society's filth. The collapse of an empire and a lawless society. In the early 1990s, the collapse of the Soviet Union opened a door of opportunity for Popkov. Government systems fell apart. The economy collapsed. Crime flooded the streets. The police force was no exception: understaffed, underfunded, and demoralized. Authority vanished almost overnight. In this chaos, Popkov realized something terrifying. If a police officer committed crimes in a world where police could barely protect themselves, no one would suspect him. While his colleagues sank into corruption and apathy, Popkov quietly observed the streets of Angarsk. Who walked alone at night? Which neighborhoods lacked patrols? Which women appeared vulnerable? He analyzed the city not as a protector, but as a predator. 1992. The birth of a monster. In 1992, the pressure inside Popkov finally erupted. Fantasy was no longer enough. As a police officer, he had seen death up close: crime scenes, corpses, paperwork. He knew how fragile life was, how easily death could be dismissed as routine. One night, he straightened his uniform and started his patrol car. The tools meant to protect civilians, government-issued authority, a badge, a vehicle, became instruments of personal violence. To Popkov, the streets of Angarsk were a city of sin, and he believed it was his duty to judge and punish. Thus, under the protection of the law itself, the man who would become one of the most horrific serial killers in Russian history, the Angarsk Maniac, the Werewolf, the Mad Dog of Angarsk, was born. Wearing three masks: a normal husband, a loving father, and a trusted police officer, Mikhail Popkov stepped onto the dark roads of Siberia. This was the first page of a blood-soaked story that would last more than 20 years. 20 years of evil and police failure, a collapsing nation, women vanishing into the forests. In 1992, just after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia was plunged into massive turmoil. The economy was paralyzed, law enforcement lost its authority, and the streets filled with people forced to risk the night simply to survive. This national tragedy created the perfect hunting ground for Mikhail Popkov. The dense birch forests and isolated highways surrounding Angarsk and Irkutsk slowly became places of silent screams. Women walked into the darkness and never returned. At first, police did not recognize these cases as the work of a serial killer. Across Russia, missing persons reports were exploding, and bodies were often dismissed as the result of drunken fights or simple robberies gone wrong. Popkov exploited this chaos, deliberately targeting areas where law enforcement rarely looked. The twisted code of the cleaner. Popkov did not see himself as a murderer. In his mind, he was a cleaner, someone purging society of moral decay. His targets followed a pattern: women between the ages of 19 and 50, often intoxicated, walking alone late at night, returning from parties, or involved in prostitution. Before killing, he conducted what he believed was a moral test. He approached women on the street and offered them a ride or help. Those who accepted were immediately judged as immoral. In his warped logic, a decent woman would never get into a stranger's car. Many of his victims were socially vulnerable women with limited support systems, few resources, or families unable to protect them. That vulnerability made his crimes easier to commit and easier to ignore. The ultimate weapon of authority: a police uniform. The single most important reason Popkov was able to kill for so long was the police uniform he wore. A stranger stopping a car at night would raise alarms, but a man in a clean uniform, with a badge shining in the dark, inspired trust. To these women, Popkov was not a threat, he was a rescuer. "I'll take you home safely." Coming from a police officer, those words carried the weight of the state itself. Even when off-duty, he wore his uniform while hunting, sometimes driving a personal vehicle, sometimes a patrol car. The victims willingly entered his car, never suspecting danger until the doors locked and the road turned away from the city toward the forest. This psychological trap, built entirely on trust, allowed Popkov to lure dozens of victims without a single failure. Extreme violence and the depth of depravity. The moment they reached an isolated road or deep forest, the protector became a predator. Popkov's killings were brutally violent and methodless. He used knives, axes, baseball bats, screwdrivers, anything within reach, including rocks picked up at the scene. But the violence did not end with death. He mutilated bodies extensively and committed acts of necrophilia, engaging in sexual acts with the corpses of his victims. This behavior revealed his complete dehumanization of them, not as people, but as objects meant to be controlled and destroyed. Afterward, he dumped the bodies deep in forests or buried them beneath snow. Then he returned home, helping his daughter with homework, sitting at the family table once again, playing the role of a normal father. Systemic failure. Why was he never caught? The reason this killing spree lasted nearly 20 years lies in the catastrophic failure of Russia's law enforcement system at the time. Institutional incompetence and corruption. During the 1990s, Russian police forces were understaffed, underpaid, and deeply corrupt. Resources for major investigations were scarce, and crimes involving marginalized victims were often deprioritized or ignored entirely. No shared intelligence. There was no centralized crime database. Police departments did not share information across districts. As a result, similar murders occurring in different regions were never connected into a single pattern. Internal bias and protection. Investigators assumed the killer was an outsider. The idea that a police officer could be responsible was nearly unthinkable, an internal taboo. Popkov even responded to crime scenes he himself had created, assisting in evidence collection and quietly listening to investigative discussions. The killer was hiding in plain sight. The Wednesday killer myth. Because many bodies were discovered on Wednesdays, the media and some investigators labeled the suspect the Wednesday killer. In reality, this was nothing more than a coincidence related to discovery times. The false theory led investigators in the wrong direction, buying Popkov even more time. A cycle of endless fear. From 1992 to 2011, Popkov turned the Angarsk region into a landscape of terror. With each passing year, he grew more confident, almost proud of his ability to outsmart the system. While police chased false leads, bodies decayed beneath the snow, and families waited endlessly for answers. By day, he spoke of protecting citizens as a police officer. By night, he became one of the most prolific killers in Russian history. This illusion of peace lasted for 2 decades until a major investigative breakthrough in 2012 finally exposed the truth. For 20 winters, the people of Angarsk lived alongside a monster, unaware that the uniform they trusted most was hiding the very thing that hunted them. Suspicion and the turning point in the investigation. One monster emerging through the fog. By the late 1990s, a chilling realization began to spread within the investigative authorities of the Irkutsk region. Cases once treated as isolated disappearances and murders were now forming a single, undeniable pattern confirmed by data. The condition of the bodies, the similarities in disposal sites, and the victims' ages and last known movements all pointed to one conclusion: these crimes were being committed by a single predator. Investigators gave this faceless monster a name, the Mad Dog of Angarsk. A dedicated task force was formed, but progress was painfully slow. The killer seemed to be operating above the police, not beneath them. He knew which areas were being searched, when patrols were increased, and how investigations shifted. Within the task force, a dark joke began to circulate. What if he's watching us in real time? Profiling the killer, an expert hidden behind a uniform. In a bold move for its time, the task force turned to criminal profiling. Reconstructing the crime scenes led investigators to a disturbing conclusion. This was not a lucky criminal. This was a professional deeply familiar with police work. The evidence was compelling. First, victims entered the killer's vehicle without signs of struggle, suggesting the suspect held a position that inspired immediate trust. Second, body disposal sites were located in remote forests or near restricted areas, places only someone with detailed knowledge of terrain and law enforcement blind spots would choose. Finally, the crime scenes were unnervingly clean. No fingerprints, no hair, no traceable evidence. The killer wasn't avoiding forensic methods. He was anticipating them. The first physical brake tire tracks from a Lada 4x4 Niva. After years of stagnation, the investigation finally found traction through a seemingly minor but critical piece of physical evidence. At multiple crime scenes, identical tire tracks were discovered in mud and snow. Forensic analysis identified them as belonging to a Lada 4x4, commonly known as the Niva rugged off-road vehicle. This detail changed everything. The Lada 4x4 was widely used by Russian police and government agencies. While civilians could own one, investigators recognized its significance. They began reviewing all Lada 4x4 vehicles that had passed through the relevant areas during the estimated times of the murders. For the first time, the task force had to confront a painful possibility. The killer might be one of them. The wall of silence turning the blade inward. Suspecting a fellow officer sent shockwaves through the police force. Investigating colleagues was seen as betrayal, something that threatened unity and morale. Senior officials resisted the theory, some actively obstructing the investigation. This was the blue wall of silence. But the task force pressed forward. They quietly compiled a list of current and former Angarsk police officers who owned or had access to a Lada 4x4. Somewhere on that growing list was the name Mikhail Popkov. Yet he remained calm, continuing to greet investigators, offer opinions on cases, and blend in as a trusted colleague. As the net tightened, Popkov used his authority and insider knowledge to slip through it again and again. The rise of forensic science and the approach of judgment. By the mid-2000s, the investigation entered a new phase. DNA analysis, already transforming criminal investigations in the West, began to take root in Russia as well. Traces once considered useless minute biological material, skin cells, bodily fluids were now recognized as molecular fingerprints, capable of identifying a killer. Investigators revisited preserved evidence from past victims and extracted DNA samples. At the time, these samples could not yet name the suspect, but they formed something just as powerful, an invisible net from which the killer could never escape. All that was needed was one opportunity to compare the DNA against a wide pool of potential suspects. 2011, the sudden silence of the monster. Then, unexpectedly, around 2011, the killing stopped. No one knew why. Had Popkov chosen to stop, or had he sensed the pressure closing in? Investigators did not see this as an ending but as the calm before the storm. As 2012 approached, the task force prepared for an unprecedented operation. The mass collection of DNA from suspected police officers. It was a gamble, one that would expose the darkest secrets of the institution itself. The moment of crisis for Popkov was approaching, not from the streets he controlled for decades, but from the very organization he trusted to protect him. By then, Popkov had left the police and was working as a security guard, living what appeared to be a quiet, ordinary life. He did not realize that the tide of forensic science was already at his feet. After 20 years of darkness, the end was finally in sight. Arrest, confession, and an endless series of trials. 2012, 1 out of 3,500. The net tightens. In 2012, investigators in the Irkutsk region made a final, desperate gamble. To break a serial murder case that had remained unsolved for nearly 2 decades, authorities decided to collect DNA samples from all 3,500 current and former police officers who had worked in the area during the years of the killings. It was a painful and humiliating decision. The police were turning their scrutiny inward, exposing their own institution. But there was no other choice. Mikhail Popkov was among the names on that list. By then, he had already left the police force and was living a quiet life, working as a security guard and occasionally dealing used cars, apparently preparing for a peaceful retirement. When his DNA was collected, Popkov remained unnervingly calm. After 20 years of escaping suspicion, he may have believed his luck would protect him once again. This time, it didn't. Forensic analysis revealed a perfect match between Popkov's DNA and genetic material recovered from multiple crime scenes. The moment the results came back, investigators moved in. Arrest on a train to Vladivostok. In June 2012, Popkov was arrested aboard a train traveling to Vladivostok, where he was planning to purchase a used vehicle. When armed officers entered the train car, he did not resist. Instead, he reportedly said, "I always knew this day would come." With that, the man who had terrorized Angarsk for 20 years was finally taken into custody. Interrogation and the first confession. At first, Popkov refused to speak. He denied responsibility and invoked his right to remain silent. But faced with indisputable DNA evidence, resistance became pointless. He eventually confessed to 22 murders and 2 attempted murders, the cases investigators could prove beyond doubt. It was only the beginning. The first life sentence and the confession game. In January 2015, an Irkutsk court sentenced Popkov to life in prison for the murder of 22 women. For most criminals, that would have been the end. For Popkov, it was merely the start of a new game. From inside prison, he began summoning investigators and offering additional confessions, one crime at a time. This was not remorse. In Russia's harsh life sentence facilities, any chance to be transferred to a detention center for questioning where conditions were slightly better, conversations were possible, and cigarettes could be obtained was valuable. Popkov used his memories as currency. He taunted investigators with precise details, treating each confession like a bargaining chip. In 2017, he stunned the nation by confessing to 59 additional murders, surpassing Russia's most notorious killers. On December 10, 2018, Popkov stood trial once again. Of the 59 additional confessions, 56 murders were proven in court. This brought his official victim count to 78, surpassing Russia's most infamous serial killers. Andrei Chikatilo, the butcher of Rostov, 52 victims. Alexander Pichkin, the chessboard killer, 48 victims. The court sentenced Popkov to a second life sentence, a virtually unprecedented punishment in Russian legal history. Throughout the trial, the details of his crimes were so brutal they were difficult to hear. Popkov showed no remorse. He described his actions as a form of social cleansing. As he spoke, victims' families sat in the courtroom, forced to relive their grief with every word. Expert testimony: abuse, hatred, and control. Psychological experts, including psychiatrist Drive Alexander Grishin, testified extensively during the proceedings. Drive Grishin explained that Popkov's childhood, marked by severe physical and emotional abuse from his alcoholic mother, played a crucial role in shaping his worldview. Over time, Popkov came to see women not as individuals, but as objects of hatred, as trash that needed to be eliminated. Investigators also pointed to his obsessive belief that his wife had been unfaithful, which acted as a trigger for his violence. However, experts were clear on one point: these factors did not mitigate his responsibility. Popkov fully understood the harm he was causing. He planned his crimes carefully and exploited his position as a police officer to avoid detection. He was not insane. He was deliberate. Confessions that never ended: 83 proven murders. Even after receiving 2 life sentences, Popkov continued to confess. In July 2020, he admitted to 2 more murders. In 2021, the court added an additional sentence. In November 2023, 3 more killings were officially confirmed. Final court recognized verdicts: January 2015, 22 murders, life sentence; December 2018, 56 murders, second life sentence; June 2021, 2 murders, additional 9 years, 8 months; November 2023, 3 murders, additional 10 years. The total number of victims legally confirmed by the court reached 83. In court, Popkov calmly pointed out crime scenes and described murder weapons, speaking like an artist cataloging his work. Thousands of pages of court records now stand as a permanent chronicle of one of the most prolific serial killers in human history. 83 lives lost, a uniform once trusted, and a monster who hid in plain sight for 20 years. Judgment of the law and the questions that remain. November 2023, the final gavel of a long legal epic. In November 2023, the sound of a gavel echoed through an Irkutsk courtroom one last time. Mikhail Popkov was sentenced to an additional 10 years in prison for 3 more murders he had confessed to. Numerically, the sentence meant little to a man already serving 2 life sentences, but symbolically, it mattered. It was the state's declaration that not a single victim would be forgotten, and a formal closing chapter to a brutal killing spree that spanned more than 3 decades. With this ruling, Popkov was officially recorded as having murdered 83 people, making him the deadliest serial killer in modern Russian history. He has now left the courtroom forever, sealed away behind concrete walls where sunlight rarely reaches. A punishment heavier than death, life without execution. Each new revelation of Popkov's crimes reignited public outrage. Many demanded his execution, asking how justice could allow a man who killed 83 people to live at the taxpayers' expense. But Russia abolished executions in practice in 1996, declaring a moratorium on the death penalty as part of its entry into the Council of Europe, a policy that remains in effect today. As a result, Popkov received life imprisonment instead. Experts emphasize that a Russian life sentence is far from lenient. Popkov is held in one of the country's most notorious maximum security prisons. Inmates spend nearly 24 hours a day in tiny solitary cells. When moved, they are blindfolded and forced to bend at the waist. Contact with the outside world is minimal, almost non-existent. What remains for him is time. Time to remember. Time to wait. Time to die slowly inside the weight of his own crimes. A second judgment, life inside the prison hierarchy. Russian prisons operate under a rigid, unofficial caste system. Those convicted of sexual violence or brutal crimes against women are treated as untouchables, the lowest rank among inmates. Popkov's past as a police officer made his position even worse. He lives under constant threat and contempt, not only from fellow prisoners, but often from guards who show him no humanity. The authoritative officer who once ruled the night no longer exists. He is no longer a name, only a number. And each night, in the cold silence of his cell, he experiences a fraction of the fear he once inflicted on others. The shadow that remains, confessions beyond the verdict. Despite the final ruling, the Popkov case remains shrouded in uncertainty. He has claimed responsibility for more than 90 murders, yet only 83 were proven in court. The remaining cases lacked sufficient evidence and remain officially unsolved. Psychologists warn that serial killers sometimes exaggerate or fabricate confessions to manipulate investigators or maintain a sense of power. At the same time, it is impossible to rule out the existence of additional, undiscovered victims. Somewhere in the forests of Angarsk and Irkutsk, unidentified remains may still lie hidden. For the families of the missing, the question never fades. Is this truly the end? A painful legacy, lessons written in blood. The Popkov case forced Russia to confront deep systemic failures. Police transparency. The realization that a serving officer could be responsible exposed critical weaknesses in internal oversight. In response, internal affairs units were strengthened and psychological screenings expanded. National DNA databases. DNA evidence, which ultimately exposed Popkov, became a cornerstone of Russian violent crime investigations. Large-scale genetic data systems were formalized nationwide, re-evaluating forgotten victims. Most of Popkov's victims came from socially vulnerable backgrounds. Their deaths forced a reckoning with a fundamental truth: no one is disposable. No one deserves to be forgotten. The true ending: scars and memory. Mikhail Popkov will grow old in prison, slowly fading from public view, but the scars he left behind are permanent. For families who lost daughters, mothers, and wives, life sentences can never bring closure. The case may be legally closed, but healing has only just begun. And it leaves us with an unsettling question: how do we recognize a monster when it wears the face of an ordinary neighbor? Popkov's name now belongs to the darkest chapter of criminal history. Let it stand as a warning, so that never again does a predator hide behind a uniform. That concludes today's case file. If you found this video informative, please like and subscribe. We'll return tomorrow with another case and another mystery. Thank you for watching.